and welcome back to RPMbassy. Today I'm doing an album that I just sort of picked off of the shelf, and it kind of came about because of a conversation I was having with a friend about album covers. And this is actually probably, for the band in question, probably my least favourite album cover of theirs by like a country mile. And at the time it was made, like technically there's some sort of computational impressiveness to how the cover was made, but these days it's a very, very basic album cover. But it's a very, very good album, very, very well known album, at least for one song, but all of the songs on here definitely are worth a listen. So the album we're talking about is 90125 by Yes. So this is a 1983 album from the progressive rock band. So this is an interesting one because they were sort of almost split up, or pretty much were, and they had recorded the album Drama in 1980. The vocalist Trevor Horn had replaced John Anderson for that album, and then after that they essentially all fell apart, and several members went off and split off to do other things with a guitarist called Trevor Rabin, and they formed a band called Cinema, which gets a mention on here under the song title Cinema. And eventually it all kind of came full circle, where they then like hired John Anderson, who is the original or first founding member, vocalist of Yes, and then basically kind of like brought back all of the original members to a degree, so that you sort of had this like revival of Yes, but with a completely new approach. And Trevor Horn, who was vocalist for one album, for the Drama album previously, then came on as a producer for this one. It's a very, very weird combination of things, and it's surprising that it sort of like worked so well together. But Trevor Rabin, as I say, is the guitarist who kind of stepped on for this album, and his influence is like quite big, I think, in terms of the approach to the songwriting. Not necessarily like just how it sounds or anything like that, or the melodies, but like the arrangements and things like that. It's definitely got more of a pop sensibility than previous stuff. And probably the poppiest track on here is the one everyone knows, Owner of a Lonely Heart, which, you know, is by far and away Yes's biggest song. Really, like, beyond that, probably the next big song is Roundabout, which is, I would say, still a relatively unknown song in comparison. It's definitely gained more popularity in recent years because of the sort of to be continued meme, and I think that's based off of JoJo's Bizarre Adventure, which is an anime, and there's a big kind of rabbit hole to fall down there. So yeah, you have John Anderson on vocals, Chris Squire on bass, Trevor Rabin, or Rabin, it might be Rabin, I'm going to say Rabin, on guitar, Alan White on drums, and Tony Kaye on keyboards. So Alan White and Tony Kaye sort of came on board as part of that initial Cinema band. And Tony Kaye is Yes's original founding keyboardist. Really kind of complicated kind of history with this band. And I mean, with the number of albums they've had and the number of members, it's hardly a surprise that it's hard to keep up. But yeah, Tony Kaye was actually fired, I think, in like 1971, and then he was rehired. And on research, and the reasoning is that his like piano style or his keyboard style was considered more simple, which I think is a bit of a backhanded compliment, really. But I guess, you know, when you compare him to someone like Rick Wakeman, who was sort of like the long-time keyboardist prior to Drama, the album previous, it kind of makes sense. Like when you compare any sort of keyboard or synth player to his kind of really virtuoso kind of style. So John Anderson, as I say, is the sort of like main vocalist for this. Trevor Horn, previous vocalist, is also kind of a part of this album, but as a producer. in that sort of downtime for the band, he had then gone on to become a record producer, and he comes on board for this. He also has backing vocals on the album, as does pretty much everyone, actually. I think there's maybe 2 songs where John Anderson is the sole vocalist out of the 9 tracks. So really, like, everybody is kind of pulling double duty here to a degree. Bit of a stylistic change for the band, but there are still plenty of elements in there which I think, obviously I wasn't around at the time to kind of garner feedback for how this went, but yes, it was very popular because of Owner of a Lonely Heart. But I think, as someone who got into Yes, obviously way after their sort of like heyday, this to me still feels like a very, very good album for them. And if you are kind of after that more sort of ostentatious, almost kind of weird and geeky kind of prog rock kind of style, there are a couple of tracks on here that kind of fit the bill, and they'll keep you happy, I think. So as far as the chart performance of the album, obviously they're a prog rock band. It's never going to be like a complete whirlwind and kind of, take the world by storm, but it did do pretty well. Got to number 16 in the UK charts, number 5 on the US Billboard charts, and Owner of a Lonely Heart was actually a number 1 in the US, and their only number 1 song in the US as well. But as I say, that's not the only song on here, and while it is a great song, there's some other stuff we really need to mention. I do want to point out, though, the sort of production style in particular, the way that Trevor Horn has sort of brought on a more sort of poppy sound, and Trevor Rabin's guitar sort of approach is the way it feels. It's got quite a sort of glam metal feel to it. It's almost heavy. The kind of tonality of the guitar and the sort of mix choices. They do actually. I believe there is a sort of quote from him where he explicitly wanted it to sound really heavy. So you've got like quad tracked guitars, like 2 or 4 either side stereo mix, and it just sounds really full and huge, and it kind of works actually for prog in general. Like you sort of wonder why some bands didn't do that more often, because you sort of want this kind of epic feeling for that kind of progressive weirdness sometimes, and yeah, for that combination of prog and kind of the pop sensibilities as well, this kind of like the production really is kind of the killer on this. It's absolutely banging to listen to, like just sounds amazing throughout, and like the tonality, as I said, the guitar solos and the guitar cleans in particular, really, really excellent. The keyboard, phenomenal. There's a ton of Fairlight stuff on here. That kind of sort of orchestral stab that everybody knows from Owner of a Lonely Heart. That's a Fairlight CMI, which I believe Trevor Horn was like using on a different project, and I think Tony Kaye just kind of like got hold of it and just decided he was going to chuck that on the track. So yeah, lots of like really cool, and at the time what would have been quite innovative and groundbreaking sort of sound options. So yeah, Owner of a Lonely Heart, I'm not going to go too deep into that because we all know how that sounds and how catchy of a track it is. That sort of wide vocal and everything, everybody loves that. But I do want to mention in particular the guitar solo, that harmonized solo really, really does sound excellent. And that's where you can kind of hear that sort of that metal kind of sound coming in. Despite the fact that Trevor Rabin was the sort of one who kind of pushed them towards a poppier sound, he's kind of got that metal sensibility as well, which is really cool. The big songs on here as well, outside of that, were Leave It and It Can Happen. They were the sort of other 2 singles, and Leave It is excellent as well. If you're not if you've not delved into the band, Leave It is a great song to check out. It's got some amazing vocal harmonies, and that's like a super rich sounding track in particular. Cinema is the first track on side B, and that's just a purely instrumental. That's a sort of like little reference to what the band initially were before they reformed into Yes again. The cool track, like again, quite a heavy sounding song actually. Quite short though. I believe the shortest track on the album, it's like 2 minutes long, but it sounds really good for what it is. And my personal favourite, Hearts, which is the final song on the album. What an epic song, and again a really phenomenal solo on this one. It's like there's so many sort of peaks and valleys in the song, really varied and quite linear in a good way, in that it's not revisiting things too often. You kind of just keep getting new stuff, and it feels like the sort of truest progressive rock song on the album, at least in my opinion. So musically, like really phenomenal. I highly recommend listening to the album tracks if you're not familiar with them. Another thing to mention as well, it's a weird one, but it's something that I have kept thinking back, and I didn't realise until recently where I was kind of drawing a connection. But if you are a fan of The Police and you haven't heard Yes in any big way, do check them out, because actually there's like vocally and tonally, there's actually quite a lot of similarities going on. You've got, you know, really great drummers, you know, like Stuart Copeland versus Alan White, and then you've got some really like intricate and amazing like clean guitar playing, and then this kind of like high bordering on falsetto kind of heady voice kind of vocal going on with like broad wide production. There's a ton of similarities to them actually. You know, maybe other people have drawn the conclusions before, but it's something that just like popped into my head. And if you're familiar with one and you haven't heard the other, it might be some crossover. You might enjoy it. Another interesting thing, despite the fact that this is such like a weird culmination of like the members kind of almost like falling into making an album, I believe this is as far as the members' timeline for the entire band, I believe between this and the next album is the longest uninterrupted lineup. In that there are lineups where you keep no members leave but members join, but this is I may be wrong, but I'm pretty sure this is the only time where they reach 5 years without having any member leave or join in their entire lifespan, I'm pretty sure. So it almost like, you know, this is in a way, it's kind of like a revival for the band. And obviously afterwards they would kind of, Rick Wakeman would come back and other members would come in and out. And like, I do sort of wonder, like, did the success of Owner of a Lonely Heart kind of, did that spur on them continuing when previously it almost seemed like it was just a complete fallout and they were never going to do anything again? Because it had been like three or so years where they'd done nothing and kind of like had stopped touring and everything. So yeah, perhaps this was kind of the thing that brought them back together. As I said, the artwork, for me, it's iconic in its own right, but insofar as like art, graphic design goes these days, it's pretty unimpressive, isn't it? You know, it's essentially like, what, 5 colours. You've got a silver, a blue, a darker blue, a yellow and a pink. And, you know, at the time it would have been groundbreaking to kind of like make these sort of graphics on a computer, because they were computer graphics at the time. But yeah, these days a little bit lacking perhaps, and for me, I personally prefer the more classic Yes album covers that we're used to, with those sort of weird fantasy landscapes that kind of evoke that kind of progressive rock feeling a little bit more, at least for my money. Inside, pretty basic sleeve. You've just got your credits and your lyric sheet, but it is nice to have nonetheless. Yeah, it's such an easy album to get hold of these days. You know, it was a big album, despite the fact that it wasn't necessarily a chart topper. It was very successful nonetheless, and I do recommend picking it up. As with many of Yes's other albums as well. Fragile is a good one as well. I think, you know, pick it up. The songs that people don't necessarily know off the top of their heads actually are kind of some of the best ones. Owner of a Lonely Heart is great, but Hearts and Leave It, those are two damn good bangers of songs. So yeah, if you haven't heard it, how? And if you haven't got a copy, just grab one. They are pretty damn cheap. I remember picking this one up, like I paid like £2 for this, and it sounds excellent. You know, I believe they've had some repressings, sort of deluxe editions with like 15, 16 tracks on them in more recent years. But I don't know, these 9 tracks are pretty damn good in their own right. So I would say just stick with the original, get it for dirt cheap, and just have a lovely time. And that's it. Thank you very much.